Shakim Ra have a suggestion for content topic to help you build your channel. Really? You was really that much of a fan. You wanted to suggest something for my show. Thank you so much.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. Okay. All right, no problem.
Welcome, everybody. This is D. Durrell with the Conscious Clientele. Happy to be here once again. Today, you will be seeing D. Durrell operating in therapist mode today. There will be no fuckery today. There will not be D. Durrell going out of the way, being theatrical and so forth. This will be a video that will focus on me educating and providing a psychoeducational tool for people who have issues with grief. Okay. This is a video that was requested by someone in the sector that I am from, with the pro-Black Umar sector, who is going through some things that is relatable to this particular topic. This person asked me if I could give a professional, somewhat educational presentation or summary of issues of people who are dealing with grief or people who have suffered a loss and their inability to cope with that at the moment. Okay. This person, came to me very surprised that that they wanted to talk to me about this, but I was very I would say I was a bit flattered that they requested this from me. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about the effective ways that you can grieve. And I'm going to relate it to losing a family member, particularly a close family member or at least a spouse or someone that you've been in a relationship for a long period of time. So as I go through the stages of grief, I utilize in therapy, I use what's called the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. Okay. He's, to me, one of at the forefront of this particular type of therapy, in which you're using this model to guide people to reach into a state of accepting and functioning through the loss of a family member. Today, as I go through each stage and as I go through therapeutic means of effectively treating this and other tools that could be used, I'm going to in some way relate it to people who had just lost their husband, their wife, a longtime confidant, someone that they had, just say a longtime person you were in a relationship or a romantic relationship, particularly if you had children, and particularly if you basically were operating under a non-state sanctioned marriage. That's going to be the purpose of this particular live stream today. I'm definitely going to look forward to hearing any questions as it relate to those that are going to want to ask about stages of grief and how I'm within a therapeutic environment facilitate therapy in a way to help people learn to function and develop some sense of normalcy throughout their life without the existence of that person that they held dear to their life. Now, before I get started, I'd just like to give a shout out to those that are here. Give a shout out to We Unlock. What's up, Tiff Griff? I also like to thank Nikki Proctor Walden for coming in. Appreciate you for coming in. She said she finally caught me live. I'm glad you're able to come in and catch me for this particular live. This is going to be a very educational, a very therapeutic laden video today. This is not typical of my videos on D. Durrell, the Rebirth. Now, I'm operating out of the Life Solutions and the Black Balance Network. Those particular networks, I'm in my psychotherapist mode. I will be presenting myself fully within the confines of my profession, not necessarily me just outwardly showing my personality and so forth. Okay. Also, I would like to thank We Unlock came in. What's up, Topaz? I'm glad Topaz is also a therapist as myself in the city. What's going on, Iron Statesman? And also appreciate West Bank VDA 504 for coming in. Okay. So now I'm going to get to it. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what occurs. As I go through this model, I want you all to be cognizant of the fact that there's not a specific way to grieve. The stages that I am going to present to you represent 5 stages of grief. I'm going to present it in a certain order. However, I want to caution you, and this is one of the biggest criticisms that Kubler-Ross experienced in creating this model, is that in the creation of the model, it kind of presented things as if you were going in steps. You can't, if you go to one step, you have to go to another, then another, and another in order to receive acceptance at the end. The biggest criticism is that people, for the most part, grieve recurrently from one different stage to another. It can go into cycles. It can go back and forth. It is not going to necessarily be one means another one, then another one, and another one, and another one. Okay? No, it doesn't mean that. Topaz used the terminology non-linear. Okay? I agree. Because you can go from being depressed to something else, to anger, then to bargaining. Okay? So I want to caution you all as I go through these stages. I want to caution you that if you are grieving, just because you're not grieving in the stages, that means you're doing something wrong. Okay? We also have to understand, you have to be aware that when Kubler-Ross created these stages, it didn't necessarily account for triggers, of emotional triggers of why you are in a state of anger or a state of denial and back and forth. One day you could be in one stage and something that reminded you of that person can subconsciously trigger you to act in another way. Okay? So again, I want you to be aware of that. Now, towards the end, I will function. I mean, not function, but towards the end, I will go more into the nuances of what a person may encounter, particularly in that first year, which to me is the most complicated and most pivotal year in determining how effectively you can grieve. Okay, that first year, without going with that spouse, your husband, your wife, that person that you spent 20 plus years with, 30 plus years, 5, 10 years, it doesn't matter the years. The fact that you have to now learn how to live your life in the absence of that person is very difficult. I also want to caution that when you grieve, you have to be careful of what you're doing to occupy your mind and not necessarily confront your emotions. Because see, many times people pile a bunch of activities, which is nothing wrong with doing activities, particularly what you're routinely doing. But sometimes those routines and those activities can block your ability to deal with your emotions, to deal with the stages of grief, to deal with actually confronting. We want to caution you in that fine line between engaging in meaningful activity to help you feel in a sense of normalcy, as opposed to engaging in activities that deter you from truly grieving. Okay? So there's a difference. Now, I'm going to go about at this point, as I'm talking about the stages of grief, I'm going to go and talk about each stage, and in each stage, I'm going to kind of go back and forth, but I'm going to go through it in chronological order as the way it is taught, and then I will go back and forth in discussing certain things. Okay. Now, again, we're talking about the stages of grief. The first stage of grief, or within the situation in which, and I talk about this in therapy as I speak to the person that is grieving. What we want to focus on is that in most situations, upon anybody learning that someone has died. Now, I'm going to focus a lot as it relates to someone losing their boyfriend, girlfriend, their wife, husband, lover, as far as you having a connection, romantic connection in which this person has been a large part of your life. I'm not going to use situations of extended family, immediate family. I'm going to use pretty much from the perspective of a marriage or a serious relationship. Okay. No matter what the situation is, whether you anticipate death, or you knew that death was going to be inevitable, depending on the time frame that someone is chronically ill, or a wreck, or something that abruptly happened without you being prepared for it. I'm going to say this: in most situations, not all situations, but in most situations, the typical person within a normal range is going to act in a state of denial. Let me repeat. They will act in a state of denial for the most part. Now, I'm not speaking in the majorative, as this is going, well, not necessarily majorative, but I'm not going to speak in absolute terms. Okay. I'm not going to speak in absolute terms because this is not an absolute construct. Nothing is absolute when it comes to human behavior. Okay. Nothing is, because depending on the parameters in which that person is functioning, culture, and so forth, everything could be different. Okay. So people grieve differently culturally. Now, in a state of denial, what we're going to encounter in which things don't make sense. I cannot believe that this is happening. The reality of is not necessarily the reality of what you want. The initial reaction of surprise and disbelief, emotionally not being prepared that this person will no longer be here. No one in my, I've been counseling since 2001. 2002, 2003. I've never been with a client that grieved that basically didn't feel shocked, even if knowing that this person is in the hospital or this person has been dealing with cancer and so forth. Just the verification of death causes the denial. Okay, so in that state, it's hard to come to terms with the reality, even if you knew it's inevitable or not. The fact of someone verifying, confirming that, hey, this person is dead, this person has died, whether it's a surprise or not, no one is prepared to emotionally say, this person initially died and I'm fully accepting of it and I'm just going to move forward. No big deal. Denial in most situations will be the logical response. Okay? In most situations, an overwhelming majority. Okay? So that kind of talks about what the denial stage. So in the grieving process, you will experience denial. Next, anger. And in that anger, you start to question. You start asking the question, why? You start getting mad at God. How many times I've been in therapy and how many times I have heard people out of anger and inability to grieve question God, question everything that makes up the world, they question their value system, societal norms. They question religion. They question their spirituality. In the anger is basically a product of not making sense of the fact that you think you didn't deserve to lose this person. Out of that anger, you strive to search for rationality to why this person should have not died, should have never departed. It can result to you lashing out at others. It can result to you throwing things, hitting things, being mad at yourself. The anger, although I agree that there can be healthy outlets to release that anger, there can also be toxic ways. Cursing out others, yelling at others, not typically being who you are in day-to-day routines because of this loss. The bitterness that can be observed from others, the hypersensitivity, the pressure in voice, nonverbal communication that is somewhat uncharacteristic of you in most situations. When you're grieving, anger can be displayed in this manner because you're noticing every day that person that you went to bed with, that person that you woke up with, that person that you made love to, that person that cared so much about you, because you feel like you're losing love. You've lost love. From a human perspective, anger is a typical response to not knowing how to live without this person. Next stage is bargaining. In my position and in my professional position, this is the hardest stage in my as far as I'm concerned, is people bargaining in the process as far as processing out of to help minimize. Bargaining in many situations can kind of coincide with anger, and it also can coincide with denial. Bargaining is a means in which you think that you could have had control over someone else dying or staying alive. Bargaining creates an illogical means to creating scenarios in which you could have determined a different outcome. Bargaining allows you to say the what if, maybe if I should have, if I would have, if I could have, if I should have. I told him to take his medication. If I would have only picked him up an hour early. The questions began to just cycle and cycle and cycle. But there's no solution to no avail. There's nothing you can do. The bargaining creates a cycle of you repetitively trying to not deal with the inevitable, with the reality. The reality is that you cannot change the fact that this person is no longer here. You cannot change the fact that this person is deceased. You cannot change that the world that you knew with this person no longer exists. Bargaining is a psychological means of you thinking you could have changed it. You could have, changed the inevitable when you really can't. It deters you from acceptance. You can only question yourself so much. And also in bargaining, because it coincides with anger, you know how we begin to blame others? If my children would have only did this, my wife could have lived. If my kids could have helped me as my wife or my husband went through these things, if he would have been well taken care of, he could have at least lived longer. Okay? I want us to understand this. The constant acting or the constant repetitive processing of questions that cannot change anything. God, if I just would have only had more faith, if I would have only prayed more, I should have listened. And then sometimes people bargain with the person who's dead. Why didn't you take your medication? You could have just listened to me. If only you would have done these X amount of things. This is what bargaining looks like. This is what bargaining sounds like. This is what bargaining is how it's presented when I'm in a therapeutic environment counseling people that have this issue of grief. I'm dealing with several clients right now who are dealing with losses right now. And they go through these stages recurrently from one to another, depending on how things are going before they can reach a state of acceptance. I also want to caution as I go through these stages, as I went through denial, as I went through anger, and as I'm talking about bargaining, that I cannot put, and no competent therapist can foresee how long you're going to deal with any of these stages. Our goal is to help you minimize, and if we can extinguish, but in some ways minimize the effect of this, of the denial, the anger, and the bargaining. In my opinion, bargaining is one of the most difficult stages. To me, it is, because people can get in a situation where they're constantly asking questions, constantly predicting that what could have happened, looking at things from hindsight. And no matter how many times they do this, you keep coming back to the start, in which this person is not here. That could have not changed anything. No matter how many times you ask questions, those questions have no influence on the fact that it was that time for that person to go. There's nothing we can do about that. It's nothing that I can say that can change it. There's nothing that you can do. There's nothing that anybody else can do and say. to cause that person to return to you, or that could have prevented it. When it's a person's time to go, it's a person's time to go. Bargaining does not produce the resurrection of anybody, nor the prevention of death. Now, the fourth stage, which is the stage of depression. To me, when people think of grieving, when people think of people mourning, people think of depression. This is what most people think being depressed is the strongest indicator of someone grieving. Matter of fact, in our society, we think that if a person does not look depressed or grieving or crying, that they probably don't seem like they care. Only through psychoeducation that we understand that everybody grieves differently. And just because the display of sadness is not evident doesn't mean that this person is not grieving, because people repress their feelings. One of the biggest denial is one of the biggest ways, or most effective ways, of repressing feelings. Bargaining can be used as a way of repressing, because you're trying to prevent yourself from understanding what is to be true, that your partner is not here anymore. Your partner is not here. This is the stage in which people think that's what grieving means. Okay? This is what people think. This is what you're supposed to be depressed. No, you're not. You don't have to be depressed. Okay? You don't have to be depressed. Is it within a normal range to show a level of sadness and pain, crying, and so forth, being emotional? Yes, that's within a normal range. However, that's not the only emotion. That's others. So in depression, you want to understand that you feel hopeless. You begin to feel helpless about life without this person. Within being depressed in this stage, I'm kind of talking about, it kind of goes in line with other symptoms of depression, in which you may notice that you're not eating like you used to eat. You're not sleeping the way you once slept, because now you notice, I'm not sleeping and can feel that other person. The just little things can trigger depression. The fact that now I'm sleeping in an empty bed. I don't get the kiss in the morning, the good morning, how you doing? I don't get the situation where I'm making a cup of coffee for someone, or they're making a cup of coffee for me. We're not taking a walk around the park or around the neighborhood. I don't get to hear this person turn on the music. Or in many situations, that depression comes because you're no longer even experiencing the things that partner did to annoy you. Even the annoying things will be missed. In which, let's say they turned, they left the door open and didn't lock the home, the doors. Let's say they left the lights on in the room and you have to constantly tell them not to do this. All of those things that were part of your day-to-day routine, you no longer are able to manifest in that as it relates to interacting with that person in that manner, good or bad. And good or bad, you don't have the privilege of correcting or experiencing what that person had to offer. No one is prepared fully to live without someone that they have been living with or who've been connected to from a spiritual, sexual, physiological level, social level, and emotional level for years. And they're no longer here. So the depression comes about because your lack of being able to cope with that person no longer existed. And so it manifests itself in some of the things that I just talked about as it relates to sadness, crying, negative thinking, feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. There also may be situations when you're oversleeping, not sleeping enough, or overeating, or not eating enough. Lack of taking care of hygiene, not being able to work, walking around in a lethargic manner. These are the signs of what a person will experience or could experience systematically as it relates to depression as the fourth stage of grieving. Now, I do want to come back and tell you, just because a person is depressed, don't mean that they can't go back to denying things, bargaining, or even being in anger. They can all go back and forth. The last stage is acceptance. Now, I'm going to go back in this because, see, acceptance is a tricky thing. Because one, to realize one is acceptance. Okay? We got to understand this. Now, see, people are writing in the chat. I will go back and read what you all are talking about. I want to go through the stages, so I don't want to get sidetracked. But in acceptance, is about taking in, understanding, and coming into terms with the fact of the reality. And the reality is this person is dead. This person is deceased. I have to live in a new reality of this person not being here. So the phrases may change when you are in acceptance. It can go from, I can't believe something is happening. Why is this happening? No, they're not dead. I can't believe this. And anger, it can go from, damn, this should have happened. Why the hell did so-and-so do this? Why did God allow this to happen to me? Into bargaining, in which you're trying to make ways in which you think what if I could have done something? And to the fact that you're just going to say the inevitable. My husband is dead. My wife is dead. But I'm going to get through it. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to work through it. I'm going to work towards getting through things. The fabric of what you said, what you say in relations to your reality changes to the fact that you know that it's the reality, and I'm not using ways as the previous stages would allow you to do as far as to try to make you think that something is other than what it is. But in the state of acceptance, you can deal with the reality. And the reality is that the person is not here. The person is dead. And you can verbally come to terms with that and say it in a manner in which it doesn't trigger the other stages of denial, anger, bargaining, and depression. You realize that this is what has occurred. I have to make the best of my life from this day moving forward. I have to learn to grieve and get through this. Okay? I have to adjust. Okay, I have to adjust in order to in some way function, because I still have to work. I still have to be there for my children, my grandkids. I still have to be there for friends, family. There are activities and things that I used to do that I don't do now. In a state of acceptance, you realize that your life still has meaning, even without this person. And I have to learn to live a meaningful life without this person. Now, I'm going to repeat this again. This is what acceptance look like. And I want to talk about how people get there. Okay. So we want to understand, you can go from being depressed to denying again. You can go from being angry to bargaining. You can go from bargaining to being angry. The first 4 stages are not edged in stone. They're not sequential to one another. They're insequential or non-sequential. But usually in most situations, when somebody hear of a person that they love, their loved one, a person they've been close with and bonded with, most people, 90+% of the time, are going to act in a state of denial. I'm not going to say, some people may hear something and they may immediately become depressed, or they may immediately get angry. But in most situations, you may have some level of denial. Okay, so I'm looking at this again. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression. Any of these 4 can be experienced at any point. It's not sequential. But at the end, no matter what, it could take 5 years, it could take 3 years, 2 years, 10 years. I hope it don't take that long. But for many, there are people that it does take that long, because they get caught up in anger. They get caught up in bargaining and denial. They are depressed for years without the proper treatment. But at the end of the day, acceptance is where you want to be, because acceptance is where you basically come to terms with the fact that this person died. It's a normal process of life, whether it was by accident, forcibly done in the hands of somebody else, or by disease, or natural causes, or whatever means it occurred. Okay? So I just want you to understand that. Now I'm going to go through the symptoms again, because I kind of talked about symptoms of grief. I've kind of talked about symptoms of grief, particularly when I talked about anger and depression, particularly the symptoms of depression. And see, these are the observable things that people usually see. And they think that I talked about that mainly within depression, but I'm talking about the crying, experiencing headaches, difficulty sleeping, questioning the purpose of life. That's when you're bargaining. Questioning spirituality. Again, that's the anger and bargaining. feeling detached from others, isolating oneself. That's when you're depressed. Isolating from friends and family, that's more depression. Abnormal behavior. Now, abnormal behavior, that can mean a lot of things, but I'm going to say you're deviating from your baseline behavior. Your baseline behavior is how you typically function on a day-to-day basis. Worry, anxiety, depression, frustration, feeling guilty, fatigue. I talked about feeling lethargic. Loss of appetite, aching pains and bones, stress. Because you're not functioning in the same manner that you did when that person was alive. Remembering your first date. Remembering when you all were dating. Remember when you got engaged. Remember when you got proposed to or you got that proposal. When you had your children, all the first, everything that you did together of importance that signified that union between you and that person. Every positive thing, and even some of the negative things you didn't like. Because in the stages of grief, in the stages of bargaining, you wish you could get mad at a person again. You wish that you could get angry at this person or get pissed off at them. You wish you had the opportunity to do those, even the negative things. Again, I'm relating this to that relationship, that dyad between man and woman, whether it was wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, or what have you. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about, as we talk about acceptance, we want to gain acceptance. And sometimes through acceptance, that can be achieved through you doing the work. And the work, meaning you're seeking some type of treatment or you're working on things to change things within yourself, which I don't necessarily advocate. I think that when you're grieving, if you find yourself, if people want to know to answer questions, I'm going to answer some questions. The question is, in the state of grieving, when do you identify that maybe I need therapy? The minute you can no longer do day-to-day activities or it's strenuous to do those activities and it lasts over a month, you may want to invest in therapy. If you find yourself not being able to go to work, you're not eating, you're not sleeping, you're not doing the day-to-day things that makes a functional human being, that may be a sign I may want to consider therapy. Now, as we talk about the treatment, there's things these are your options. Losing your husband, losing your wife. Again, there's no timetable on how you deal with these stages of grief. There is none. I cannot promise you that you're going to only bargain for 3 weeks. I can't promise you that you're going to be depressed for only a month. I can't promise you that. But what I can say is that therapy has a high effectiveness of minimizing these symptoms so that you can effectively grieve and you can effectively accept. Now, I want to kind of preface on this for a second as to what the first year, and in my experience dealing grief counseling, I'm a person that focuses on what is called cognitive behavioral therapy. And I also engage in person-centered therapy. Now, the cognitive therapy deals more with me challenging, confronting, using rational, logical means of helping you change your behavior, understand the triggers, and to effectively process and restructure illogical thoughts and beliefs and behaviors that continue to allow you to go through this pendulum over and over and over again, trying to make sense of why you can't deal with the fact that your loved one is no longer here. Now, I also, in a sense, the framework of how I conduct myself and how I react and present myself as a therapist, I use what's called person-centered, which is geared towards you. I'm showing unconditional positive regard. I'm showing empathy. I'm showing positive regard. I'm doing a lot of things in which I'm reflecting and summarizing and so forth and repeating to help you understand that I, as your therapist in this therapeutic relationship, understand where you're coming from, and I can help you make sense of this. And I see eye to eye with you. Emotionally, I'm connected in a sense that when you speak to me, there's a certain level of trust that you can say and express yourself in a manner in which you don't feel hesitant. Because the more that you're able to do that, the better that I can in helping you alleviate these problems that are preventing you from functioning in your day-to-day life. Okay? So, also, guys, particularly if you find yourself experiencing a great deal of anxiety, a great deal of depression, if you feel that some of these symptoms are somewhat influencing you in a manner that's overwhelming and it's definitely affecting your health, I would encourage you to see a psychiatrist. To see a psychiatrist to give you antidepressants, potentially, or whatever medicines that they see fit. Mostly anti-anxiety or anti-depression medicine that could help you minimize and reduce those symptoms. In many cases, the best form of treatment is psychotherapy along with psychopharmacology. That together produces the best treatment, particularly for those that need that. There are some people who just do fine without therapy and they have medicine. Then there's those that don't want medicine and they're going to clearly use psychotherapy as a means of coping. And then there's those that are going to need both of them. Okay? But if anybody is going through this, you're not going to produce a good outcome without seeking anything. Far too often, people try to do things on their own that they're unable to do so. And what that produces? It produces a person that you notice was happy and then no longer, they never get back to that point. It produces a person that may go 10 years mad and angry at everybody. That may produce a person who's always bitter. That produces a person who's probably no longer as healthy as they once were. It may produce a person that's adversarial. That may produce a person that now lacks the ability to connect with others. They're usually living lives that are not pleasurable for the most part. They're not pleasurable. Now, I'm going to go ahead. That pretty much concludes my stages of grief again. And I'm just going to one last time. We talked about denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and lastly, acceptance. And again, as it relates to the first four, they all can occur interchangeably in not one specific manner, depending on your situation, how you're adjusting, and the triggers. Now, I'm saying that again because I want to say one more thing. The first year, in my opinion, my professional opinion, is the hardest. Because you know why? This will be the first year you won't celebrate their birthday. This will be the first year you won't go to a vacation with them. The first year you won't have Christmas. The first year you won't have Thanksgiving. No Valentine's Day. This is the first year you won't have Sunday dinner. This will be the first year of all those things that you did on a consistent basis for 20, 30, 10, 15 years. You have to now do this without them. And the fact of you being aware that even when you're with your family, this person is absent. All of those celebrations, all of those family cultural things that you like to do, the traveling, listening to music, all of the things that were once that person's, their clothing, their jewelry, the music that they listen to. Now you have to listen to this, and these things serve as a symbol of a reminder of their existence. Now, in therapy, as I'm going through cognitive exercises, I will identify all of those things and use those as a means of helping a person identify what was great about that person, what was good about that person, what connected you to that person. And we're going to focus on the positives that person was in their life. And we're going to focus on that. Not the fact that the absence of that person, but the fact that the idea, the things that person did, the influence that they had on others still lives on whether they're here or not. And I effectively process and use behavioral shaping and cognitive exercises to help people connect to that as a means of honoring, respecting, and gravitating to those things that person did that was valuable to you and to others. But that first year, in most cases, from a clinical standpoint, in which I've seen, is to me by far the most difficult year, particularly at the end of the year when you have Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Valentine's Day. That is my most busiest time of the year. There are two busy times of the year that I have. It's at the end of a year, but between the end of the year, and it starts in the end of October. Come November, the phone calls are going to be coming and coming and coming. Not until probably the end of February, it starts to subside. Another time that the things come is around towards the end of the school year, between, I'm going to say, April and May, and then part of June when school is over with, is some of the busiest times of the year by far. By far. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to answer some of the questions that I see in the chat. I'm going to answer those respectively. And if anybody has any other questions or anything they would like to add, I will give them the opportunity to do so. Okay. Will Locke said, it takes a while for people who have been in a certain situation to come to a stage of calmness and correct. Okay. See, now you got people being disrespectful. Let me go ahead and time this person out. Okay, let's see who else. I see Poetic Flocka saying, we're rocking with your real content, Godfather. Take notice of the drama seeking niggas who aren't here with his real productive content. Yeah, that is true. It's okay. I understand it. I was expecting that. Blue the Light said, after how I see you talk to people online, the people you associate with one day beefing the next, friends with, let me time this person out. You see, I'm trying to be respectful and mature in this one, and there's still people that don't get it, but that's okay. I knew this was going to happen. It's not the first time that I gave real content on this platform and people had issues, so I get it. Nikki Proctor Walden said, is this stage where guilt may compel someone into depression? Yes. Guilt. To be honest with you, bargaining is the stage where you're going to feel the guilt. You can also feel guilty while you're angry. And either or, like we talked about, and as Topaz said, this is non-linear and it's interchangeable. Anger can produce depression. Bargaining can produce the depression. Either one. Good question. Donovan Aiken says, salute D. Durrell for displaying your craft for us. This is a touchy and sensitive topic that many people have to face. Unfortunately, you're giving them the steps to cope and overcome it. Willock said, instead of coping with your own problems, you deflect the issue into someone else, which is tragic. Yeah, that happens. That happens a lot in anger and bargaining. Topaz says, some people's sadness exhibits in being irritability. Yes. And when you're depressed like that, you are going to feel frustrated and irritable. Cool. Chaos Rain received the book. Received that book I mailed to you that Umar just written. Okay, cool. I'm glad you got it, brother. So Topaz says sometimes they have resolved the sadness stage quickly because that's not part of their personal behavior. Yes, that depends on the person. You are right. That can be individualized. Like I said, some stages it's different. Some people can stay in the angry stage for the longest. Then there's some people that be in denial for the longest. There's no timetable of getting out of any stage. There's no timetable. Nikki, this is Darrell, not the Godfather character, just rapping some things at work. He does good stuff on this channel. He doesn't go live on this that much. All right. None Squirrels On said, just curious on your opinion on virtual counseling. Seems to be getting bigger nowadays. I saw some counselors doing it online. Yes. On my D Darrell, the Life Solutions channel, I've talked about virtual therapy. I do virtual therapy through two platforms. It's one that's called Psychology Today has its own virtual counseling room, and also I use a company called Doxy.me that has their own virtual platform. Actually, today I at 5:45. I have an appointment at 5 o'clock and I have another appointment at 5:45. I will be undergoing a virtual counseling session. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Virtual counseling, I'm not big on virtual counseling. I prefer seeing clients face to face. But because of the occurrence of COVID-19, I've done more virtual counseling in the last year than I've done in the last 10 years. And to be honest with you, there were other virtual counseling products that you could have used. Matter of fact, there are certain platforms that are HIPAA compliant. I actually had a virtual counseling platform that I used on and off since 2014. And then I decided to no longer use that, and I began using it was a company called Counseling Web D or something. I had another one where it was kind of like a counseling type platform, but it's also used to do conferences. So I've used a variety, but I like Doxy.me and Psychology Today has a free one on their website. So Nikki Proctor Waters says, DJ Drama, I am too liberated in my thinking to let others control my opinions of people. Everyone has a chance to establish their own identity with me. Okay. Let's see what else. Living Life to the Fullest says, showing respect to D. Darrell. Deep subject. Thank you for covering it. No, he said good informal counseling. Now, this is psychoeducation. Living Life to the Fullest says, make sense of all emotions come into play. That is correct. And Ms. T. Pre said, I remember losing my husband. Yes, that's something you never forget. You never forget that day of hearing that someone is no longer here or knowing that or even witnessing it. And Nikki Proctor Walden says, my comment was in reference to bargaining. Yes. So Nikki Proctor says, so how would you address those who seek acceptance as a stage of forgetting and attempting to avoid it? Well, that's not acceptance. That's not acceptance. That's actually denial. If you're trying to forget and attempt to avoid, that's denial. That's not a stage of acceptance. In the stage of acceptance, as I talked about, your verbal usage of your emotions change and your reality change. It goes from why did it happen? Did it have to happen? What if I did this to prevent it? To the fact of the reality is that my partner is dead. My partner is gone. My partner is no longer here. I have to learn to commemorate his life or her life. I have to learn to function without them. When you are in each stage, notice the terms and phrases that you use are different. The stages that you just the phrases that you just presented are more in line with forgetting and attempting to avoid it. Those are more in line of denial. What's going on, Kai NY007? Peace to the conscious clientele, the real life solutions. How about Squarespace? I don't know what you're talking about. Well, I don't know what Flacco, but shout out to Flacco. TMK said, is it customary to prescribe medication after only one visit? The prescription of the prescribing of medication is outside of my expertise. Although I'm going to say that a psychiatrist typically in assessing someone psychologically is probably going to give them a prescription for whatever symptoms that he feels or she feels needs to be treated. So the thing is that I'm not going to say it's customary, but typically psychiatrists, after evaluating someone, more than likely are going to prescribe medication if they see fit. Kai NY007 says virtual counseling is a great option going on more now. Yes, it is. I do a lot of virtual counseling. I don't like it per se, but I'm doing a lot more. Miss T. Pre said, appreciate the video, D. It reminds me of how far I have come mentally and emotionally since his death. Thank you. I'm glad you're able to identify that, because the reason why you have is because you're in that process of acceptance. You're in that stage of acceptance and moving forward. You know, you're moving forward in your love life, with your children, your career, a lot of things that you're doing that are productive. Doesn't mean you stop loving. And I want everybody to understand this. In a state of acceptance and moving on, doesn't mean that you don't feel the same about that person when they were alive. Doesn't mean you feel any less about them. It just means that you've now learned how to function without their acceptance, and their loss is not psychologically overwhelming or monopolizing you emotionally or daily as it once did when they initially passed away. Oh, okay. He said Squarespace. Okay, I never heard of that, Flop. So yeah, there's a lot of different places, man. I have right now, man. I just got recruited from. There's a couple of companies that have been trying to. There's a company called Better Help that's been trying to recruit me for years. There's another company. There's several companies that send me stuff all the time. I just got an email today from a insurance company that wants me to do some virtual things, more not necessarily just in counseling, but more case management and also consulting in nature. And I'm going to kind of review what they have to offer, if that's something I would like to do or not. So I'm just kind of see how that will go, per se. So yeah, guys, that's where I'm at now. At this point, guys, if there are any more questions, I want to let you all ask me a question. Okay. Poetic Flacco said, How soon after you pass away would you be okay with your wife? Really? What kind of question is that? Maybe that's a good question for T Pre. I'm gonna say this for me personally. Um, I don't know, man. I don't know how soon after you pass away would you be okay? It really don't matter if I'm okay with it or not because I'm dead. But I would say if my wife decided to date after, let's say, 3 months, I would be okay with that. 3 or 4 months, I'd be okay with that. I don't want my partner to be lonely and not moving on with that life. I will be okay after a few months. That's me. That's just me. Other people are different. Some people want somebody to wait a year. I'm gonna be honest with you. My wife told me that she said I bet not ever. I should wait at least a year or two. I'm like, really? That's going too far. But that's just us speaking. But yeah, I would say I'd be okay after a few months. Outlaw Light Easy says, have you heard of Gerald of Robert Whitaker of D. Derrick? No, I haven't. Check out the book Anatomy of an Epidemic. Okay. T. Pre said, you just made me laugh like in the midst of my tears. See? And to be honest with you, therapeutically, humor is something that is welcome in coping. I encourage people to do any type of pleasurable, relaxing exercises or activities. To be honest with you, reminisce over those good times that you had and so forth. Instead of using those monumental things that happen in your life that you celebrate, use those as a means of helping you cope, because now you're seeing that person, not the fact that they're not here, but you're looking at them in a positive light as far as how they brought happiness into your life. Check out Whitaker's blog, Man in America, great mental health resource. Okay. Poetic says, glad to see you healing. Social justice warrior stand up. Can you help see Conscious Energy get a job as really? Stop it. Come on, man. Stop. And T. Pre said it took me 2 years. Okay. And to be honest with you, there are a lot of women that I know that, particularly if they've been with their husbands for years and years, it may take them a year or two, at least 6 months to 2 years. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know how y'all feel about this. Men seem to not wait that long. I'm just going to be honest with you. Men don't usually wait as long as women do. Most that I ever seen of a man waiting was probably 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months. Most men that I know after their wife is deceased, they may date the next month. They may date in 2 months. I know they don't sound good, but to me, yeah, 90. I'm okay with. I've seen women date after their husband died, in 2 months, in a month. I've known people when their relative died, they start dating the next month. Social justice warrior said, "That's a damn shame." I'm supposed to be in professional mode, man. Stop it, y'all not allowing me to be me. I'm being the therapist right now. Stop it with this, man. It's the truth. Again, I can't tell people. I'm gonna be honest with you. Men tend to get lonelier quicker than women do. Men can't deal with loneliness as effectively as most women. Men, one of the biggest reasons men may start dating quicker is because they can't deal with being lonely. Men have a need to want to be with a woman. Women, in many ways, Flacco says 2 years is what I was thinking. 3 months is a little too soon. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Most women, there are women that's going to wait most women ain't waiting no 2 damn years. I'm sorry. Stop. And the women today certainly ain't waiting no 2 years. I'm going to be honest with you. Most women that at this state in time, I'm going to say most women probably going to wait 6 months. I'm going to say 4 to 6 months, and they're going to start dating again. Or they're going to start getting a friend. They may not be having sex with that friend, but they're going to have that one friend, that one male friend they're going to want to, hold on to and connect with. They may not have sex with them, but now 2 years, I don't encourage nobody to wait 2 years. 2 years is a sign, depending on the situation, of you got stuck in some stages that prevented you from accepting. And like I told you, it's different. There's some women that may wait 5 years. There are some women who don't date ever again, which I don't encourage. Miss T. Pre said, the first year I don't remember much. The second year in the rebuild process, then one day I was ready for some. She said, one day I was ready for some. I'm going to tell you what happened, T. Pre. In that situation, that first year, your body, you were numb. You were numb that first year. You were numb. That second year, even though you numb, your body still has needs and wants. And as the second year, as you started building that process up, those wants became more apparent, and then it became inevitable, and then you was ready to go. Hey, but you know what? What I'm going to say, you didn't allow yourself to get into a relationship not being mentally, psychologically there. Okay? You waited till it was your time. Some people would take that amount of time. Social Justice Warrior says 2 to 5 years for me. Oh, you don't really know that. I'm going to say you don't know until, unfortunately, no one wants to go through that, but you don't really know. And see, she just validated what I said. Oh, I did have a friend during that time. Exactly. A lot of women, even though they may not be having sex with a guy, a lot of women connect with a guy to give them that emotional, even though they still want a male connection that can I'm not going to say it's substituting, but it allows them to emotionally feel like they have some type of interaction with a male that potentially could be in a romantic or sexual, context. She said no sex though. Yeah, but you just said over here, then I wanted some. Then I was ready for some. Social Justice Warrior stand up. I like my women to be all natural, just like the women in the 60s. The women in the 60s were not all natural. They was wearing wigs, and they were wearing other things too. And they're wearing lashes too. So I guess, okay. All right. So with that being said, guys, if there's any more questions, ask the therapist, D. Durrell. Any other questions you want me to answer? I hope that I was able to paint a picture of what grieving looks like as I talked about the things that one may go through in those stages. I hope I was able to in some way allow you to identify things within yourself and maybe into others who may be going through a grieving situation or a loss. Oh, she said it was the second year. Yeah, I bet. Social Justice Warrior said, a face full of makeup, weave, and fake fingernails doesn't work for me. Okay, we get you. We get you, Social Justice Warrior. All right. So with that being said, guys, I appreciate you all for supporting me. I got to get back to work. I got to do some paperwork for the next hour and a half or so. And then I will be actually doing some virtual therapy and a face-to-face. So other than that, guys, I have a great day. This is D. Durrell, broadcasting from D. Durrell Life Solutions, broadcasting from D. Durrell The Rebirth, and from the Black Balance Network. Y'all have a great day.